Ladies and gentlemen, we're good to go again. The first title fight of the evening. Please welcome, fighting for the record for HMAC Inverness, Scotland, you have Ross Urquhart.
My name's Ross Urquhart, I'm 20 years old and I'm an amateur mixed martial artist training out of HMAC Inverness.
Get a bag, I'll be tripping now.
Two of my biggest achievements would be some of the titles that I've won in the past. One of them's the WKA Scottish K1 Kickboxing title and one of them's the ISKA British K1 Kickboxing title. So I began training in martial arts when I was around 4 years old. I started off in karate and kickboxing. Didn't start competing until I was about 8 years old, and I've been competing in competitions ever since then. I think at 16 or 17 I had my first fight on a show where there's a group of people, like a crowd watching, and I've been doing that for 3 or 4 years now. So I don't really remember why I started in martial arts. I was too young at the time. I think my mum and dad asked me if it was something that I wanted to do, and I said yes without really understanding what I was signing myself up for. But yeah, I enjoyed it and I kept doing it, I kept coming, and within a few years it had been half of my life, so I just continued to do it, and it just felt like such a big part of me that I never stopped doing it. It's always been hard just with the nature of the sport. Obviously it's a tough sport, any combat sport is tough, whether it's kickboxing, boxing, MMA. It's always tough, and you've always got to be pushed to your physical limit just because of the nature of the sport. Your opponent, whoever it is going to also be pushing themselves just as hard. But now that I'm a bit older and the stakes are a little bit higher and it's something that I want to do as a career, and I'm fighting other people who want to win just as much as I do, it is slightly more difficult. So I think when I was about 16, 17, I realised it was potentially something I could do as a career. I think maybe people were feeding my ego a little bit too much and building me up a little bit too much, and I started to believe what they were saying. And after having a few fights and doing pretty well, I kind of saw a future for myself in the sport and kept training, kept competing, and decided there's nothing else I would rather give 100% of my time to and all my effort to. So outside of martial arts training, I train every day conditioning wise, so usually I'll run every day. Sometimes it's long distance running, so I'll maybe run 3 or 4 miles as fast as I can, and some days I'll do sprints, so I run up and down the hill as fast as I can, as many times as I can. So I usually set a timer for the sprints, which is specific to the time I'm going to be fighting. If I'm fighting 3-minute rounds, I'll run up and down the hill as many times as I can in 3 minutes, take a minute off, and then repeat it as many rounds as I'm going to be fighting. So I don't really enjoy the conditioning side of things. It's obviously really painful and really uncomfortable, and it has to be because you've got to be in a pretty extreme physical condition to be in a fight. But I do it obviously because you have to if you want to fight. It takes a lot of physical fitness. So there's a famous saying by a heavyweight boxer called Joe Louis. He was a heavyweight world champion, and he was quoted saying, "If you cheat on your road work in the dark of the early morning, then you'll get found out under the bright lights on fight night." And that's basically the whole idea behind the conditioning side of things. If you want to perform on fight night, then you have to put the work in when no one's looking, because that's when it really counts. So I've had lots of fights as a kid. I started off competing at kickboxing competitions in different rule sets of kickboxing. They don't go on record just because you're only a kid and it's light contact, but full contact on shows where there's an audience watching, I've had 8 fights and my record is 7-1. The lead up to a fight is very mentally draining. You could know you've got a fight coming up for maybe 6 to 8 weeks, and everything you do every day, everything you think about revolves around fighting that person on that night. So it's quite mentally draining, but at the same time it kind of gets rid of any problems outside the gym and outside of fighting, because obviously everything comes second to that one big problem that's in your mind. It's also really intense physically, and it's very routine. So you'll wake up some days, you're training in the morning, you're going to come home, have food, I might have PTs during the middle of the day, and then you're going to train again at night, which could be conditioning, could be more skill training, so it could be grappling or striking, but it's very routine and you're doing the same stuff every day over and over again for weeks. So mentally on the lead up to a fight, it kind of gives you a little bit of an edge, or like a fire under your belly, people would say, because everything in your life comes second to that one big problem where you know on that night you're going to have to fight someone who's been training just as hard as you've been training and wants to win just as much as you want to win. And you've got to fight in front of a crowd, in front of your friends and your family, and everything just comes second to that all of a sudden, and it kind of wipes out any other problems that you might have on your mind. You just forget about them all, you know you've got that fight coming up. The night before a fight, how you feel depends on probably how big the occasion is. Every fight's obviously your biggest fight and you want to win every fight just as much, but I've kind of learned how to block out the anxiety that you get until I need to switch that on and allow a little bit of the anxiety to come in, because that gives you an edge. So I would say morning of the fight I usually wake up quite relaxed, and I don't usually start feeling anxious until we arrive at the venue. So I'm probably quite nervous up until I start getting warmed up. And then I would say any emotions I have at that point usually go away, and you're just focused on performing in the fight, what you're going to do in the fight. Walking out to the fight's a really weird feeling. It's sort of like the same feeling you get walking up to the front of the class for a solo talk. That's sort of like all eyes are on you, except obviously you're going to be in a fight and the adrenaline's going. I think with the more you fight and the closer you fight together and you get rid of any ring rust and the more experience you get, you sort of learn how to block out the tunnel vision that you get, and take it all in and maybe even enjoy the feeling, because that's what you put all the hard work in for, is that feeling at the end of getting into the fight and that experience. But it is a weird feeling walking out in front of a crowd and everyone's looking at you, and you get into the cage and everyone's looking at you and you're standing across from your opponent. It's a very weird, surreal feeling. Even the ground, the ground that you're standing on in the cage in the ring, it feels really weird. I mean, you can feel the jelly in your legs, but it's quite good, and you can learn to enjoy it after a while. Yeah, when you're actually in the fight, again, it depends a lot on what part of the fight you're in, your opponent, how good are they, are you winning comfortably, are you facing some adversity, are you tired or fatigued? So how you're feeling depends a lot on what's happening in the fight. But I would say most of the time you don't really have a lot of time to think. You might have a couple moments of clarity during the fight where something comes to your head, or a moment where you plan to do something, but for the most part you're not thinking, you're just you're really in the moment, you're seeing what's in front of you, you're hearing what's in front of you. And then you've got to go back to the corner, and your coaches have got to make sure you're still there mentally and you're still hyped up and you're not going to make bad decisions. But physically during the fight, it's a very uncomfortable feeling. On the lead up to the fight, I'm always confident, and you'll get asked by people questions like, how are you feeling, do you think you're going to win? So the answer is always yes, and it has to be yes. Even if you're tricking yourself, and I wouldn't say lying to yourself, but even if you're just faking it, you always have to be confident, and you always have to believe that you're going to win the fight, because as soon as you start letting doubts creeping into your head that you might lose, you're probably going to lose. When you lose, it's a really horrible feeling, because obviously all the work you've put in and the sacrifices that you've made, they've kind of not paid off, which is really horrible. And then you start running through loads of different scenarios in your head about things you could have done differently, or did you try your hardest, did you give it 100%, could you have done anything more? So a lot of doubts creep in your head, and that feeling lasts a long time. It could be weeks before you get over it. After a loss, I would say I do the same stuff to improve as I do after a win. I would watch the fight and I watch my fights loads and loads over and over again, and just notice every little detail. Maybe I could have thrown different shots, maybe I could have thrown things at a different time, I could have moved this a different way, I could have stood a different way, maybe my strategy could have been different. So I would say after a win or a loss, I'm always doing
I'm always trying to improve and see anything that I could have done differently. How you feel after the fight just depends on how much you've been hit and the shots that you've taken. You could come out feeling fresh, like you've not really been hit, and then sometimes you could come out struggling to walk. Your shins would be sore from kicking elbows, other shins. Your thighs could be sore from getting kicked. Your ribs could be sore. A lot of the time I'll come out of a fight, I wouldn't say a lot of the time, but sometimes you could come out of the fight with a headache and you could be sick just from taking shots to the head. So it just depends really how much punishment you've taken in the fight. So I would say what motivates me is the fact that I want to do this as a career, and ideally I would like to be able to devote all my time to martial arts, whether that's training and improving myself or teaching other people, because that's what I love to do and it's my biggest passion. That's what motivates me, is hopefully not having to ever give any of my effort to something I don't want to do. So in the lead up to a fight, it's not hard to stay diligent because, like I said, any problem or just everything in your life becomes secondary to that one main problem and that goal and the task that you have to overcome. So you're kind of, I wouldn't say scared, but in a way you are scared into doing everything right, eating right, training hard. But outside of a fight, I like to train anyway, so it's not too hard to stay diligent. It's my biggest passion and I like training, so even if I didn't have a fight coming up, I would do it anyway. I wouldn't say it's hard to stay diligent. As far as aspirations, I would say the next milestone I'd like to hit would be having my first professional fight, and then after that it would be how far can I take it. So I would like to maybe win a title in a professional organisation and just spend all my time doing something that I'm passionate about, and if I can achieve that through martial arts, then that would be the dream. I would continue doing my PTs as long as I have the time to, and it doesn't take away from the main goal, which is obviously fighting. But yeah, it's something I could see myself doing even after fighting. I would like to continue in martial arts somehow, and I could see myself doing that through coaching. I'm very passionate about what I do. I'm passionate about martial arts and the intelligence and the art of fighting and the science behind it. As far as like reaching the next level of competition, I think it's really as simple as just beating whoever is put in front of you next. As long as you can keep winning fights, then you're going to have to be given harder and tougher opponents. And if you just keep winning, it's only a matter of time before you reach the top.
The winner by split decision.
Flip that, get that, gotta get it, I'ma get a new stack with that. Shawty wanna hit it, she can do that. Click, clack, running, buddy niggas with a new track. Not black cat, but I'd rather cater meet up with a new stack. Big back, chillin' with my feet up on that roof back. Try to roof back, tell these niggas who gon' run it like a two-back. Break it like a Kit Kat, who that my nigga? Bitch, you stun on me. Got a next 10, but you PS3. Get a gun on me, psych, nah, just playing, but a front on me.
I would say it's probably camping.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So for people who are maybe not too experienced, that's just when you sit in the corner. You don't really run around the map because you don't have the experience to run around the map, so you just sit in the corner and farm kills.
We got one there.
Yeah, people tend to get quite annoyed, but that's good because they keep coming back for more, and then you just rack up the kills. Look, just there's another example, just feeding the kills. I don't really have to do much for it. I probably wouldn't eat a lot of that stuff anyway because I like to eat healthily. Fuck, it's the M's though.
Doesn't matter.